In a recent session of the House Judiciary Committee, a charged confrontation unfolded between Representative Jasmine Crockett and former President Donald Trump. The discussion centered on immigration policies, quickly escalating as Crockett criticized the Trump administration's approach to enforcement. She expressed grave concerns about the separation of families and the deportation of individuals without legal status, emphasizing the human cost of these policies and the lasting impact on children and communities. Trump, defending his administration's record, stressed the importance of strict immigration controls, framing them as necessary for national security and the protection of American jobs. The exchange drew the attention of lawmakers and the public alike, sparking debates that extended far beyond the committee room. News cameras captured every moment, broadcasting the emotional intensity of the hearing to viewers nationwide. Analysts across the political spectrum weighed in, dissecting both Crockett's assertive questioning and Trump's firm defense. Social media quickly became a battleground for opinions, with millions of users expressing strong reactions, some praising Crockett's courage in challenging a former president, others applauding Trump's unwavering commitment to enforcing immigration laws. The confrontation illustrated the sharp partisan divide that continues to shape American politics, highlighting how a single hearing could ignite discussions reaching far beyond the halls of Congress. Crockett's questioning focused not only on specific policies, but also on broader ethical questions. She highlighted stories of families torn apart by deportations, underscoring the human dimension of enforcement measures that often went unnoticed in policy debates. Her approach was methodical yet impassioned, drawing on both statistics and real-life narratives to paint a comprehensive picture of the consequences of strict immigration enforcement. Trump countered by citing numbers of deportations and arrests, presenting them as evidence of his administration's dedication to law and order. The tension in the room was palpable, a reflection of the national conversation that has been ongoing for decades. Viewers following the hearing were presented with a microcosm of the broader immigration debate in the United States. Advocates for reform emphasized the importance of humane treatment for undocumented individuals, while supporters of stringent policies stressed the protection of borders and legal systems. Throughout the session, Crockett maintained a sharp focus on accountability and transparency, questioning not only the policies themselves, but also the processes by which they were implemented. Trump's responses often pivoted to legal authority and precedent, framing enforcement as an essential component of governance. The dynamic interaction between the two figures exemplified the complexity of immigration as both a legal and moral issue. As media coverage intensified, experts weighed in on the significance of the hearing. Legal scholars analyzed the implications of deportation practices and family separations, exploring potential reforms and judicial challenges. Political commentators debated the strategic dimensions of Crockett's questioning, considering how such confrontations could influence public opinion and legislative priorities. Human rights organizations highlighted the real-life consequences for families affected by deportations, calling for policies that balance enforcement with compassion. Across news outlets, the narrative was consistent. The hearing was more than a procedural event. It was a flashpoint in a national debate that touches millions of lives. The hearing also shed light on the intersection of immigration policy with other pressing societal issues. Economic factors, community stability, and educational opportunities for children were all intertwined with the enforcement measures under scrutiny. Crockett pointed out the broader social costs of deportations, including the disruption of neighborhoods and the psychological toll on children who witness the removal of parents or guardians. Trump, in contrast, focused on deterrence and legal compliance, framing these measures as necessary to maintain order and protect citizens. The resulting dialogue underscored how immigration policy cannot be viewed in isolation, but rather as part of a complex web of societal considerations. Public reaction continued to grow in the days following the hearing. News outlets published analyses that ranged from in-depth policy discussions to human interest stories, highlighting the experiences of families affected by deportations. Social media amplified personal narratives, giving voice to those who felt directly impacted by the policies under debate. The confrontation between Crockett and Trump became emblematic of the tensions within American society, reflecting broader debates over justice, legality, and compassion. Citizens, policymakers, and commentators alike grappled with the questions raised during the hearing, highlighting the ongoing struggle to find common ground in a deeply divided nation. In the hours following the hearing, journalists and analysts dissected the exchange, replaying moments of tension and highlighting key phrases that captured the emotional weight of the discussion. Crockett's voice, measured but firm, resonated with a sense of urgency that transcended politics. She repeatedly emphasized that immigration enforcement policies are not merely legal instruments, but decisions with profound human consequences, affecting children's education, community stability, and the psychological well-being of families across the nation. Each point she made was met with both applause and criticism, reflecting the deeply polarized nature of the issue. Trump, for his part, maintained a consistent narrative. He framed immigration as a matter of national security, presenting statistics on border apprehensions and enforcement actions as evidence of the necessity for strict policies. He argued that lax enforcement could encourage illegal crossings, strain public resources, and undermine the rule of law. To Trump, the conversation was about defending the integrity of the nation's borders and upholding the authority of legal processes. In doing so, he appealed to a segment of the audience for whom the protection of American jobs and the enforcement of immigration laws remained a central concern. The contrast between the two figures was stark. Crockett focused on human stories and the moral imperative to protect vulnerable populations, while Trump emphasized legality, order, and deterrence. This tension mirrored a larger societal divide, one in which law and morality are often seen as competing forces rather than complementary elements of governance. The hearing thus became a lens through which millions of Americans could view the broader challenges of immigration policy, sparking debate not just about laws, but about the kind of society the country aspires to be. Social media platforms were flooded with commentary. Short clips of the hearing were shared widely, often accompanied by passionate opinions. Supporters of Crockett praised her courage and her insistence on confronting power directly, framing her as a champion of immigrant rights. Others criticized her approach as confrontational or politically motivated, arguing that such exchanges distract from substantive policy solutions. Meanwhile, Trump's defenders framed his responses as calm, authoritative, and necessary to defend national interests. The online discourse reflected the intensity of public engagement with immigration, highlighting how deeply personal and politically charged the issue has become. Amid the heated discussions, human stories emerged that illustrated the real-life consequences of policy decisions. Families who had faced deportation shared accounts of disruption, fear, and uncertainty. Children described the trauma of being separated from parents or guardians, while community leaders detailed the social ripple effects that result when key members of a neighborhood are removed. These stories, cited by Crockett in her questioning, underscored the human dimension often overlooked in policy debates. For many observers, these narratives provided an essential context, reminding audiences that behind every statistic lies a personal journey marked by hope, struggle, and resilience. Experts in law and public policy weighed in as well. Immigration attorneys highlighted the legal complexities surrounding deportations, the rights of undocumented individuals, and the mechanisms available to challenge enforcement actions. Scholars examined historical precedents, comparing current practices to past administrations and analyzing patterns in policy implementation. Economists explored the effects of immigration on local labor markets and social services, while psychologists assessed the impact of family separation on child development. This multidisciplinary attention underscored the multifaceted nature of immigration policy and reinforced why the hearing captured national attention. News coverage also began to examine the political dimensions of the confrontation. Analysts explored how Crockett's questioning could shape her political profile, positioning her as a vocal advocate for immigrant rights. At the same time, Trump's defense of his policies was seen as a way to solidify his base, appealing to constituents for whom border security and strict enforcement remain top priorities. The hearing thus became a microcosm of larger political dynamics, demonstrating how individual exchanges can reverberate across party lines, influence public opinion, and potentially impact future legislative agendas. The discussion inevitably expanded beyond the hearing itself. News outlets published follow-up reports examining immigration trends, border enforcement statistics, and ongoing legal challenges. Investigative journalists dug deeper into the experiences of families affected by deportations, offering in-depth profiles that humanize the debate. Editors emphasized the tension between policy objectives and humanitarian considerations, framing the story not as a singular confrontation, but as part of a larger national dialogue. In this way, the hearing served as both a catalyst and a lens, focusing public attention on an issue that touches millions of lives across the country. As the days unfolded after the hearing, national news outlets continued to spotlight the confrontation between Crockett and Trump. Television segments replayed clips of the exchange, often emphasizing the intensity in Crockett's voice and the steadfast composure of Trump as he defended his policies. Analysts debated the rhetorical strategies of both figures, noting how Crockett's methodical approach relied on human stories and empirical data, while Trump leaned on authority, precedent, and statistics to validate his positions. Each interpretation of the hearing shaped public perception, reinforcing the polarizing nature of immigration as a political and social issue. Community responses across the country reflected this divide. In major cities with large immigrant populations, community organizations held forums to discuss the implications of the hearing. These discussions focused on the challenges faced by undocumented families, the importance of legal protections, and strategies for advocacy. In areas with higher support for Trump, town halls and local news segments emphasized border security, enforcement mechanisms, and the necessity of legal compliance. The dichotomy between these responses highlighted how local context and demographics influence public interpretation of national policy debates, underscoring the complexity of governing a diverse nation. Meanwhile, human rights organizations amplified the stories highlighted by Crockett during the hearing. They documented cases of families torn apart by deportations, the long-term psychological effects on children, and the struggles of individuals navigating the immigration system. Reports included interviews with children who had been separated from their parents, teachers describing the impact on students' academic performance, and social workers outlining the broader community consequences. These narratives, deeply personal and emotionally charged, helped to translate abstract policy discussions into relatable human experiences, resonating with audiences who might otherwise engage only superficially with legislative proceedings. Political analysts also explored the strategic dimensions of the confrontation. For Crockett, the hearing represented an opportunity to assert her role as a vocal defender of immigrant rights, enhancing her profile on a national stage. For Trump, the exchange allowed him to reinforce his long-standing narrative on immigration enforcement, appealing to constituents concerned with border security, law enforcement, and national sovereignty. Commentators noted how televised hearings like this one serve as both policy discussions and political theater, where public perception can be as consequential as the legislative outcomes themselves. Economic perspectives began to surface in the media coverage as well. Economists examined the effects of deportations on local labor markets, highlighting how the removal of workers, many employed in agriculture, service industries, and essential jobs, can disrupt businesses and supply chains. Some reports emphasize the fiscal costs of enforcement actions, including detention and deportation expenditures, while others focused on the economic contributions of undocumented individuals who remain in the country. These analyses offered another layer of complexity to the debate, illustrating that immigration policy intersects not only with legal and humanitarian concerns, but also with economic realities. Legal experts weighed in on potential implications stemming from the hearing. Immigration attorneys highlighted the legal frameworks governing deportation and family separation, including due process protections, appeals mechanisms, and precedents established by past Supreme Court decisions. Some emphasized that Crockett's questioning could influence future litigation by drawing attention to procedural inconsistencies or humanitarian concerns, while others suggested that the hearing might spur legislative efforts to codify protections or clarify enforcement guidelines. The legal discourse surrounding the hearing reinforced the idea that immigration policy operates at the intersection of law, morality, and governance. The public reaction remained vibrant and divided. Social media platforms became arenas for passionate debate, with users dissecting every exchange, posting clips, and sharing personal narratives. Supporters of Crockett praised her dedication to ethical governance, lauding her insistence on confronting authority and giving a voice to marginalized communities. Conversely, Trump's supporters highlighted his commitment to legal frameworks, portraying his stance as protective of national interests. The online discourse illustrated not only the depth of public engagement with the issue, but also the emotional intensity that immigration policy evokes, demonstrating that these debates are never purely academic or procedural. They are deeply personal and often politically charged. As coverage broadened, journalists began to contextualize the hearing within the long history of U.S. immigration policy. They traced trends from the Immigration and Nationality Act to the more recent policies implemented under the Trump administration, highlighting shifts in enforcement priorities, border security measures, and legal interpretations. Historical analyses emphasized the cyclical nature of immigration debates, noting how contemporary controversies often echo past struggles over inclusion, exclusion, and the balancing of national interests with human rights. By situating the hearing in this broader historical context, news outlets provided viewers with a deeper understanding of why the confrontation carried such symbolic and practical significance. Among the most compelling aspects of the hearing were the human stories that Representative Crockett highlighted, stories that put faces to the abstract statistics often cited in debates about immigration policy. One family recounted the experience of having a father deported while the mother worked tirelessly to maintain stability for their children. The children described feelings of fear, confusion, and anger, grappling with the sudden absence of a parent and the uncertainty of their future. Social workers emphasized the psychological trauma caused by such separations, noting that even brief periods apart can have lasting developmental and emotional consequences. Crockett referenced these stories repeatedly, reminding lawmakers and viewers alike that policy decisions have tangible effects on the lives of ordinary Americans. Educators also contributed their perspectives, describing how students affected by deportation struggle in school. Attendance issues, decreased academic performance, and behavioral challenges were frequently cited by teachers as direct outcomes of family instability. Classrooms became environments where children carried the emotional weight of enforced separation, impacting their ability to learn and participate fully. Community leaders highlighted the ripple effects beyond individual families, noting that neighborhoods experience increased stress, reduced community cohesion, and a sense of insecurity when enforcement actions are carried out aggressively. These narratives underscored the broad social implications of immigration policy decisions, situating the hearing within a larger conversation about societal well-being and ethical governance. Legal experts provided additional layers of insight, framing the debate within established statutes and judicial precedents. Immigration attorneys explained the rights of undocumented individuals under U.S. law, including due process protections and avenues for appeal. Some attorneys pointed to inconsistencies in the enforcement of deportation orders, suggesting that policies under prior administrations, including Trump's, sometimes overlooked procedural safeguards. Scholars of constitutional law discussed the balance between executive authority and legislative oversight, emphasizing how hearings such as this one serve to scrutinize the limits of power and ensure accountability. By contextualizing Crockett's questioning and Trump's defense within legal frameworks, experts demonstrated the complexities inherent in enforcing and reforming immigration policy. Economic analysts also examined the ramifications of immigration enforcement highlighted in the hearing. Deportations can disrupt local labor markets, particularly in sectors heavily reliant on immigrant labor such as agriculture, construction, and services. Economists pointed out that the sudden removal of workers leads to labor shortages, which can increase costs for businesses and reduce productivity. At the same time, some studies noted that stringent enforcement policies might temporarily reduce competition for jobs, appealing to certain segments of the electorate concerned about employment. These nuanced analyses revealed that immigration is not simply a legal or moral issue. It intersects deeply with economic structures and policy outcomes that affect communities across the nation. Media coverage amplified both the confrontation itself and its broader implications. National and local news outlets aired extended segments analyzing the hearing, often highlighting the sharp contrast between Crockett's emphasis on human stories and Trump's focus on enforcement statistics. Commentary programs debated the effectiveness of Crockett's approach, with some praising her ability to articulate the human cost of deportations and others questioning whether her method politicized the hearing. Similarly, Trump's defenders highlighted his consistent messaging on border security and law enforcement, portraying him as a leader who prioritized the rule of law. This intense media scrutiny ensured that the hearing would resonate far beyond the committee room, influencing public discourse and shaping perceptions of both figures for months to come. Social media provided a particularly dynamic lens through which public reaction could be measured. Clips of the hearing went viral, often accompanied by personal anecdotes from viewers who related to the families Crockett described. Hashtags highlighting the exchange trended on multiple platforms, sparking debate among users who brought diverse perspectives and experiences to the conversation. Some social media users shared their own experiences with immigration enforcement, echoing the concerns raised by Crockett. Others debated the necessity of strict border policies, often invoking concerns about security, sovereignty, and economic stability. This digital dialogue mirrored the larger national conversation, demonstrating how a single congressional hearing can catalyze widespread engagement and reflection. The historical context of U.S. immigration policy added another layer of meaning to the hearing. Analysts drew connections between current enforcement practices and past policies, from early 20th century restrictions to the Immigration and Nationality Act, and the more recent measures implemented under Trump's administration. Patterns of exclusion, enforcement, and political contention emerged, showing that the current debates are part of a long-standing national struggle to balance legality, humanitarian concerns, and societal priorities. By situating the hearing within this historical framework, news coverage emphasized that the confrontation between Crockett and Trump was not an isolated incident, but rather a continuation of a deeply rooted policy dialogue that has shaped American society for decades. Political implications were also front and center. Crockett's assertiveness during the hearing positioned her as a prominent voice on immigration issues, potentially influencing legislative agendas and public opinion. For Trump, the defense of his policies reaffirmed his long-standing narrative on enforcement and border security, energizing his base and reinforcing his political brand. Analysts noted that televised hearings such as this serve not only as forums for policy discussion, but also as platforms for political messaging and image building, where each question and response can carry strategic significance beyond the immediate policy context.